Well, what's going on, everybody? It's Lady J, and this is the Mind His Business show. LuvLuv is enjoying herself at a family function today, so it will be just me here holding it down in the studio. And I hope that we'll keep it interesting and keep it fun and exciting and interesting for you all at the same time. We're glad that you're here. First of all, let me start off by saying Happy Father's Day to all the fathers and the father figures out there, because, of course, without you, there would be no us. It takes both a father and a mother to come together to make a baby. So we appreciate not only you starting the whole process, but also every time that you are a mentor, every time that you stand in there, every time that you stand up, every time that you show up, every time that you face challenges and overcome them so that you can be the best father that you can be, whether you're a biological father or whether you're a father figure or a mentor. We appreciate you. We need you. We need men, and we need everything that is positive that you have to offer, and we appreciate you. So big, rousing, happy Father's Day to you. So if this is your first time tuning in, my name is Lady J. I'll be your host for the next hour or so, and we've got a wonderful program here. We're glad that you've joined us on Gospel Music Omaha 100.3 FM, because we keeping God 100. So that's how you always remember the call letters, 100.3, because we keeping God 100. We are on social media and our website, so just go to gospelmusicomaha.com for the website. And we also have a website called mindhisbusiness.com, as well as you can follow us on any and all of our social media platforms with the same handle at Gospel Music Omaha or at Mind His Business. So I hope that everybody has had a fun and relaxing, not only Father's Day today. If you're listening to this on Monday, it will be yesterday. But if you're listening to it live right now, it is today. So I hope that you've had a fun and relaxing Father's Day. Also, I hope that your Juneteenth celebrations were relaxing and rejuvenating, as well as meaningful for Juneteenth and what it means to America. It's not just something that's only important for us black folks, American descendants of slavery. It's not just only a national holiday that's important to us, but it's important to the whole nation, because what Juneteenth signifies is that when you make mistakes, no matter how bad they are, that you can fix those mistakes and begin anew. And I think that's something that is important for us to remember. It's not just only a black holiday. And you said, well, Lady J, what do you mean? Well, the abolishment of slavery in 1865, and of course we know, without getting into the whole history lesson, it took a while because they didn't have social media back then. So in 1865, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, it took time for the news to travel. Now, right now, today, you and I, we have a phone, we got social media, we got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. What else do we have that's out there? TikTok, Telegram. We've got all these means to communicate with each other instantly. So no matter what's going on, we have instant communication. Well, of course, in 1865, there was no such thing. There was no internet back then at all. So literally, it either had to be sent by a letter, which was hand carried by a post person, probably on a horse or maybe a horse and buggy or something of that nature. So it took time for the news to spread all the way from Washington, D.C., all the way across the country. Eventually, a long time afterward, the very last people in Texas got the news. And so that is why we celebrate Juneteenth, is because not only did America officially say that this is something that's going to be abolished, but everybody knew about it, and it was the time of healing for our nation that came as a result of that. So basically it's saying that, a person can do terrible things, but a person can also change direction. And I think that's important for us to remember, that it's not just only for blacks, it's for everyone in America. As a matter of fact, when Juneteenth happened, when the last people found out that, oh, we're no longer enslaved, we're actually legally declared to be free, there were lots of American flags that were flown back then. They weren't flying the red, black, and green flag. And this is a very important distinction to make. Yes, we can fly the red, black, and green to signify our connection to melanated people around the world and the whole diaspora, but they were flying the American flag because for the first time, everybody in the nation was considered one nation. It wasn't two classes of people, one that was oppressors and one that was oppressed. It wasn't that. Now, we know that, of course, individual mindsets and individual ways of thinking, those things take time to change, right? So not everybody quite naturally just turned around and was, immediately prejudice and discrimination didn't just magically disappear when the last person found out we were free. However, legally, it was important that everybody was on the same page, and we finally got that. And I think there are some lessons that we can pull out of that idea, and that is sometimes we get judged by the very worst thing we've ever done, right? I feel bad for young people on social media because once you post something on social media, it's there forever. It never gets erased, and you may think you deleted it off your channel, but it's on somebody's server somewhere and somebody can pull it up. I mean, there are people that have actually lost jobs because of what they had on their social media, for example. There have been people that have been arrested for criminal activity because they posted things on social media. So we live in an age where we are judged very harshly for things that have happened, and because of the internet keeping things around forever, what we end up with is a person tends to be judged by their worst mistake. And oftentimes when they get canceled, they're not allowed to grow or to change or to learn from their experiences to become better. And I think that we should take notes about what happened with Juneteenth to say that we, rightfully so, have aught about the worst stain on our nation, which is the American version of slavery that was practiced in the South. But if we never allow ourselves to learn from that or grow from that, then it's a wasted opportunity, in my opinion, because I feel like sometimes we keep holding on to things instead of learning from them. Now, I am an American descendant of someone who was enslaved me personally. So I got a dog in this fight. And if you listen to my show for any length of time, you know I ride hard for our folks. You already know that. I might be white. Look, I might be as white as a styrofoam cup. I might be as white as a styrofoam cup in terms of my melanin count, but I ride hard for my folks, and everybody knows it. Because I feel like I got a dog in that fight. I have a reason to stand for justice for that. But I also know at the same time, too, we have to allow ourselves as Americans, or as America, as a nation, to collectively acknowledge that though we may not be perfect, at least we as a nation are doing what we can to move forward. That doesn't erase that we've got a long ways to go. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed. Again, if you've listened to me for any length of time on this show, you know that I do believe in reparations. I do believe in making things right. Having apologies sometimes is not enough. Sometimes you do have to fix things. I do believe that we should get our 40 acres and a mule, so to speak. I do believe that if we were able to give reparations to Japanese folks during the internment camps, if we were able to give reparations to Native Americans in the form of actual land, if we were able to give reparations to Jews during the Holocaust, and mind you, we weren't even in Germany when that happened, but somehow we managed to come up with money for reparations for Jews. And even today, we are sending billions of dollars over to the Russian opposition, if you will, because I don't want to get a strike from YouTube, so I have to be careful about what I say. If all these other people groups can be literally cut the check write the check and give them money and support and resources, material resources. There's no reason why we cannot find it within our means here in America to do the same thing. And some people say, well, why should I have to pay for something that I didn't do? Right? This is a common comment that you might hear. Well, I didn't own any slaves, so why should I be responsible for reparations? My answer to that is that it's not so much about you individually as much as it is as the companies and corporations that can be directly tied to a benefit that they received as a result of the commerce that was happening during that period of time. So, for example, if you owned there's companies such as, I think AIG is one, and you guys correct me in the comments if I'm not right. AIG was an insurance company that started off insurance based upon companies that were using enslaved labor. And so that company then became very much so enriched because of the commerce that was happening during that time. So quite naturally, you can trace back many companies that had their hand in the economics of the slave trade in one form or another. And so that would be where you would start. It's not necessarily me going to Jim Bob over here and saying, hey, Jim Bob, you're white and I'm black, so give me some money. It's not that oversimplified. And I hope that I'm being clear with what it is that I'm saying. It's not that simple. The other question that usually comes up as it pertains to reparations is, well, how would you know who's supposed to get reparations? Well, that answer is also fairly easy to answer, and that is that you want to see who is identified as African American for example, the last census or the census before the last. So what you don't want is what they call the $5 Indian. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term $5 Indian. The $5 Indian is a term that basically said that they were going to give, this is a long time ago, and I'm oversimplifying it a lot for a reason. So they were ready to give reparations to Native Americans. And so in order to give these reparations, they had these roles written out of who was supposed to get the reparations. Well, there were some people, as a matter of fact, a good number of people who were not Native Americans, but they were able to pay $5 and get their name listed in the registry in order to be able to call themselves Native Americans so that they could get the reparation. And that's where the term $5 Indian comes from. Well, quite naturally, we don't want that same thing to occur this time around. We really do want the funds to go to the American descendants of slavery. And so if you've identified as African American or biracial with part African American in the last census or the census before last, then that's a pretty good indication that you're African American, because at the time you identified as such in the governmental roles, there were no reparations on the table, so you didn't have an incentive to lie. Does that make sense? So you can't be like Elizabeth Warren was, the political candidate, Elizabeth Warren, talking about, oh, I'm Native American, and then you look back through her history and she ain't no Native American, but it sounded good on paper, right? But she has nothing to do with that experience whatsoever. The other thing that you can say is if your parents or grandparents are African American, then you can trace that. That would be another way. This would, of course, exclude anyone that has immigrated to the United States after slavery was abolished. So, for example, if you're a Caribbean or a Sudanese or Somalian immigrant and your family came over in the 1980s, you would not qualify for that because you were not a part of the system of enslavement. Does that make sense? So there needs to be a distinction between those who have immigrated to the United States versus those that have been here and whose family lineage would have been touched by the economic system of that time. So there are ways that you can determine who should receive reparations and who should pay reparations. The third question that people always kick around is, well, how should it be paid? Should it be a payment to individuals? Should it be in the form of business grants? Should it be in the form of land grants? Now that right there, I think that there should be some good conversation, and I think it should be a combination of things, whether it's education, business, land, ownership, direct payments. I think there's ways that we can come up with to be able to answer that question, because I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all for every situation, and there's some really good conversations that are happening around the topic right now. What I do know is that time is out for just things like, we'll say things like, we want reparations, and then the political parties will come back and say, well, here's Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. We don't want symbols at this point. We want tangibles. We don't want symbols. We want substance, right? So black folks, we said, we want reparations. And the government came back and said, we'll give you Juneteenth as a national holiday. Well, we didn't ask for that. We asked for you to cut the check. I mean, it's nice, right? It's nice to have a national holiday to say, yes, we're acknowledging that, collectively as a nation, we all are now on the same page as it relates to this topic. Yes, that's nice. It's symbolic. It's important. These things matter. Absolutely. But that's not cutting a check. That's not actually fixing the wrong. It's kind of like saying, okay, you come into my house and you steal my TV. It's nice if you say that, you know what, we're gonna add your name to a TV show on NBC or something like that. Well, that's nice that you want to put my name on a TV show, but I want my TV back. Or even better, I want a better TV because of the pain and suffering that I had to endure from you breaking in and stealing my TV. So that's something called restitution. And that's what reparations are at their core, is restitutions for the injustice. And if you think about it, if you were to add up the cost of all of the labor that was provided, I mean, forget the emotional trauma, forget all of the psychological trauma, just purely in terms of the economic output that African Americans generated. We built this country, and we actually weren't compensated for our labor. And if you were to put a dollar amount on it, let's make it simple. Let's say $1 per hour per person over a 400-year period, 200-year period, it would total up to be trillions of dollars, like trillions with a T, if you were actually to add all that up. So I think it's reasonable to say that there should be some sort of compensation. So I'm going to pull up here on the website, and I'm sorry for my typing. I'm sorry for my typing here. I'm typing as I'm talking, and I'm trying to think and talk and type all at the same time. It's kind of like walking and chewing gum at the same time. So let me see here. Let's look at, I want to look up the picture that says reparations, what has been paid out to all of the various different places. I'm scrolling, guys. I'm scrolling now. I'm really scrolling. I'm finding a lot of really good other articles that are out here. There's one that I'm looking at. Reparations for Black Americans are seeing unprecedented national support, advocates say. This article just came out on June 17th. And it says, as Juneteenth nears, civil rights groups call on the president to sign an executive order to begin the reparations process. Now, what I find interesting is that when our current president came into office in his first 100 days, he signed several executive orders. And he had executive orders for homosexuals, for immigrants, for Asians. Not one executive order was for African Americans, either for reparations or for hate crimes against African Americans. So there were a lot of there were a lot of executive orders that he put out, but not one of them was for reparations. So right now there's more of a push to say, hey, this is important. We don't just want symbols. We don't want nice flowery words. We want tangibles. And so I'm glad to see that there is some movement in that direction. And I will say that if I were a white supremacist, let's use our imagination here for a moment. If I were a white supremacist, I would be pro reparations and I would be pro actual physical compensation. You want to know why I would be pro reparations if I were a white supremacist or KKK or somebody like that? The reason I would be pro cutting the check is because once you cut the check, then the issue then is you can't come back and say cut another check. So it would say, okay, you African Americans, y'all can stop talking about this now because we have cut the check. Also, if we don't have financial education to go along with cutting the check, you and I and everyone else all knows that a lot of us will go and spend the money on things that are not assets or that decrease in value. So like, for example, if you cut the check, let's say just for fun that we've got 40 million African Americans in this country, just for fun. And we say that we're going to cut a $10,000 check for every single African American. Well, let's up the ante. Let's say $100,000. Instead of a $10,000 check for everyone, let's say we're going to cut a $100,000 check for, if you're African American, instantly we're going to put $100,000 in your account. And I know that most of the people who would get this $100,000, we'd be seeing a lot of chains, a lot of Jordans, a lot of trips. We'd be seeing a lot of cruises, a lot of private airplane trips. We'd be seeing a lot of things spent on things that don't necessarily hold their value, right? We would see a lot fewer people spending their finances on things that can retain or increase their value. Like, for example, buying land, buying real estate, buying hotels, buying apartment complexes, buying infinite banking policies where you literally can put your money in an insurance policy that can increase its value every year for the rest of your life, and then you can pass that on to your children. There are other things that we could invest in. Some people say stocks and crypto and things like that, but we should be investing in things like gold, silver, ammunition, firearms, things that have barter value, things that can increase in their value over time. You would see most people would spend their money on things that don't retain value. Fewer of us would spend our money on things that increase their value, like buying businesses, buying companies that are already successful, doing an acquisitions play, doing things like buying media networks, for example. Me personally, I own a media network. I own a radio station, and I understand the power of media to be able to shape the narrative in a direction that is positive for us and not negative for us. So if I were a white supremacist, I probably would be pro reparations because I would want them to cut the check, because I know that most of us are going to spend it on companies that are owned by white folks. And then that money will come right back into the hands of white folks. And we'd pretty much be in the same position, most of us. Some of us would be very wise with it, but there's a good number of us that would not be wise with it. But then the issue would be dead, and we couldn't go back and say, well, we want you to cut us another check, because they will say, well, you already got a check, so there's nothing else to talk about. You got your reparations, right? So really, it's to the benefit of both sides. We as African Americans need to do a really good job of preparing each other for financial success getting out of debt, buying assets and not liabilities, owning your home outright if you had a big lump sum of cash, right? Owning vehicles and equipment, owning land, all of that stuff. We need to do a better job of educating not only each other as adults, but also educating our children so that we can have what's called intergenerational wealth, which means we're passing it down to our children and our children's children and our children's children. Because financial smarts is even more important than book smarts, because it's not so much how much you make, but it's how much you keep. Now, we know this to be true because they've done studies on lottery winners and how many of them actually keep their winning after they win. Let's see, lottery winners lose all their money. I'm typing this in because I didn't have this part prepared. So let me type this in. 13 reasons most lottery winners end up losing their money is one article that's really good. And then what percentage of lottery winners go broke? Well, I think that'd be a curious question to take a look at. Let me throw this up on the screen for those of you that are watching on my live stream here. I'm reading from a website that says, what percentage of lottery winners go broke? Plus 35 more statistics. So it's talking about, in this post, you'll learn what percentage of lottery winners go broke and other shocking statistics about lotto winners. And it talks about, you'll learn the biggest myth about how many lottery winners declare bankruptcy each year. I'm actually curious to see, because I've always heard that a lot of lottery winners end up losing a lot of their money and being back where they are again. All right, so here's the statistic right here. It says the National Endowment for Financial Education denies that 70% of lottery winners end up bankrupt within 5 years after receiving a large financial windfall. This is an incorrect statistic that has been credited to the organization by Time, Fortune magazine, and many others. Lottery winners are more likely to declare bankruptcy within 3 to 5 years than the average American. Nearly 1/3 of lottery winners eventually declare bankruptcy. So it may not be this, what they're basically saying is that it may not be 70%, but they are more likely than average. So we have to be smart, because if the reparations conversation goes the way we want it to go, and they actually do start to give us things like business development, educational development, or even cutting an actual check, we got to be prepared to know what we're going to do with that when we get it. Does that make sense? We don't want to be like the lottery winner who gets a lump sum of cash and then we don't do very well with it when we get done. So there's a lot of statistics that are here in this article, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it, but this looks interesting right here. It says, how do lottery winners spend their money? And this kind of relates to the same topic, because if you get a large sum of money, let's say a tax return, or maybe somebody in your family passes away and you get the benefits of a life insurance policy, perhaps, maybe you finally get that business loan to start your business. So whatever it is, PPP loan, whatever it is that you do when you get a large sum of money, it would be similar to winning the lottery. So it says here, in how do lottery winners spend their money, it says 37%, or about 1 out of 3, invested in stocks, bonds, or real estate. Only 1/3. 17% of the winners use the money to get out of debt, which I think that's super smart. 23% of the winners use the money to buy a house. So that's 1 out of 4 used it to buy a house. 20%, which is 1 out of 5, use some of their winnings to remodel their home. And 37%, another over 1 out of 3, use lottery winnings to take a vacation. So, so it seems interesting to me that I would love to see those numbers flipped around, right? I would love to see 2 out of 3 invest in stocks, bonds, and real estate. I would love to see 4 out of 5 get out of debt. I would love to see 3 out of 4 buy a house. I would love to see 4 out of 5 remodel their house if they wish to. I'd love to see 2 out of 3 maybe take a vacation, but only after they've done the other stuff they're on the list, right? And it's the same thing with us. It doesn't have to be a lottery. It doesn't even have to be reparations. It has to be about when you get finances, you want to have good goals in place to, number one, get out of debt. Get out of debt. Can I say that again? Get out of debt. Because the scripture says that the borrower is the slave to the lender. So I'm tying all these together. We've got our freedom, our social freedom, right? Juneteenth and the Civil Rights Act and, Martin Luther King. And we've got all these things. So we obtained, at least on paper, social freedom. But if we don't understand financial freedom or economic freedom, we still will be under a form of slavery. Does that make sense? So I'm going to pull up this scripture verse here, and it's in, I think it's in, it would help if I typed it correctly, wouldn't it? All right, it's Proverbs 22, verse 7. Let me flip my page over here to you, to the Bible side. There you go. So it says right here, this is Proverbs chapter 22 in verse 7. It says, actually, I'm going to back up to verse 6 because these verses actually go together. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And you say, well, what does that have to do with money? You'll see in a moment. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the servant to the lender, or depending on which translation, that word servant means bondage, or it could mean slave, but it says servant, bondage, bondman. So when you are in debt, you are in servitude to the lender, which means that, have you ever bought something and you had to get a second job in order to pay for it? Well, now you're restricted into how you can spend your time, because now you're basically indebted to the lender. So it's a form of bondage. And we as African Americans who have been acquainted generationally with bondage, one of the number one ways we should want to get out of bondage is by getting out of debt. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not you are completely at the bottom end of the economic ladder to where you need all the social programs, right? You need WIC, Section 8, EBT, you need Medicaid, Medicare. If you're at the bottom and you need all the safety nets, there's still room for making these changes. If you're middle class and you're basically on that treadmill where you basically paycheck to paycheck and you're just working to pay off your bills and you're not really saving and getting ahead, this message also applies to you. Even if you are a person who is well off and well to do, if you are not preparing your future for your children, as it says in verse 6, you see how I'm tying it together in verse 6, it says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. In other words, we should be teaching our children good financial habits, right? How to spend less than you earn, how to save money, how to balance your books every month, how to invest money into things that can grow for you, how to buy assets and not things that lose their value, how to make a plan for having multiple streams of income, how to have a plan for making passive income. All of these things we should be teaching our children, because the educational system is not doing it. I don't remember being in a class that was specifically for balancing your checkbook. And did you take a class like that in school? I mean, maybe they have it now, but back when I was in school, you might have come across a little bit of that in your economics class, maybe as a senior in high school or something. But these are concepts that should be taught all the way from elementary school. As soon as they can do basic arithmetic, we should be teaching them the principles of finance and how to do what is necessary to be financially healthy, to be as debt free as possible. All debt is not bad debt. If you have debt that is used to build assets that create income, that's good debt. But if you have debt because you just like buying shoes and clothes and taking trips, and you're in debt for something that is not going to produce any return on the investment, that's bad debt. So good debt is okay, bad debt is not okay. But we should be teaching our children that, and that's exactly what it's saying here, that train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. So if you have good money habits even when you're young, those habits can stay with you all throughout your life, and it can make things a lot easier. Now, I can tell you from personal experience that going through a bankruptcy is no fun. Going through foreclosure is no fun. Going through paying off debt is no fun. And I have learned from experience long ago that that's not a road that I want to continue to be on. So I have a tendency now to stay away from bad debt as much as possible, because I want to be free. I don't want to be enslaved to a lender. I don't want to be enslaved to a government. I don't want to be enslaved to another human being. I want to be only a bondservant to God Almighty. He's the only one that I want to be completely committed to 100%. I don't really want to owe anybody anything. And if we go up here, if we go up to the New Testament, I love this verse that's in Romans. It's in Romans, and it talks about don't owe anybody anything, but just to love them. Let me pull that scripture up real quick. Hopefully you can see this on the screen. I'm scrolling kind of fast, so we're gonna try to find it here. Sorry if I'm squinting here. My eyeballs are a little bit goofy today. Let's look it up on the website. That'd be the fastest way to get there. Sorry for my typing. I've been told that I type kind of aggressively, but really I'm just typing as fast as I possibly can. Okay, Romans 13:8. So let me go ahead and jump there real quick. It says, owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loves another has fulfilled the law. I'll repeat it. Romans 13:8. Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another has fulfilled the law. So it's important that if you have the means to work to be financially free, because we may have our social freedom. Juneteenth is kind of a crown jewel on that fact. There is slavery that is still occurring in countries all around the world. Human slavery has existed ever since human beings have fallen, since the time of Adam. There's been human slavery. There is human slavery to this day in many different countries. And without getting too deeply into the whole slavery conversation, we were not immune to that here in America. We had a period of time where we also had human slavery as a practice. But we were able to, in large part due to the Christian pressure of the day, the abolitionists, the Friends Church, the Quakers, many of the Christian denominations were the first ones to lead the charge to say slavery is wrong, it is immoral, it is unbiblical, and we need to abolish it as quickly as possible. It was Christians that led that charge. And because of that, if you study the history of slavery in lots of countries around the world over history, America's experience with slavery was the shortest period of just about any nation in the world in terms of how long the practice continued. Does that make sense? So yes, we practiced it along with most other human nations around the world over time, but we also abolished it faster than most nations, in large part due to us with lots of Christian individuals in the country that said this is wrong and we want a change to be made. So we received our social freedoms, right? We now have freedom of movement, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to vote. We have all of the same rights as everyone else in this country, both men and women. There is still that whole 3/5 of a human clause that's in there that has not been changed. And there is also the, what do I want to say, the little asterisk in the amendment that basically says that we're all free unless you become incarcerated. So there are other ways that Satan, through individuals and through governments, is still working to enslave us. Debt is one of those ways. Criminal incarceration is one of those ways. Not teaching financial literacy is one of those ways, because if you're not able to have the most basic financial principles, then you will always be at the mercy of those who are more financially literate. So there's really not a whole lot of things you need to know to be smart financially. One, spend less than what you earn. Number two, there's only two ways to get out of debt. You have to either increase your income or decrease your expenses, or both at the same time. Number three, gaining wealth is not a quick sprint. It is a marathon, a little bit over time. Steady as you go will win the race, right? Number four, seek to teach your children. And if you didn't have good teachers coming up, you be the change. Number five, make sure that you are putting your resources into assets and not things that lose their value, or stated another way, liabilities. You want to put your finances into things that will retain their value or create a return on investment. So that's not really a lot of things to know. But if you master those things, then you will be on a path that will help you to have more options than someone who doesn't know those things. You should always have a budget, have a plan, know where your money is coming and going. That will be another principle that will be important to know. Some people literally don't know where their money is going every month. They don't know that they got Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and Stars and Showtime and HBO and Sling, and right? And so you're thinking each little thing you sign up for, oh, that's nothing. That's just $9.99 or $5.99. But by the time you add up that you got 10 different streaming services, you're paying doggone near $50, $60, $70 a month. And so do you really even watch that many channels, right? So you have to know where your money is coming in, where your money is going out, so that you can be more in control of your finances and that your finances don't control you. Jesus talked about finances almost as much or more than he talked about just about any other subject. So he's not God is not one that wants us to all be poor and broke. That's bad teaching. There's nothing in the scripture that says that you're more godly if you're poor. That's stupid. That doesn't even make any sense. Why would Jesus say, I want you to have life and have life more abundantly, but you can't have abundant life because you're supposed to also be broke? That doesn't make any sense, right? Let's be logical about it. He wouldn't tell us to have an abundant life, but then say, I want you broke and poor, and even if you get money, I want you to give it all away. That's not good teaching. That's bad teaching. Nor is it good teaching to say that, well, the richer you are, that's more of a symbol of the faith that you have. That's bad teaching too, because the amount of money that you have in your bank account has no resemblance to how spiritual you are. Because there are some righteous people that have a lot of money. There's some righteous people that's broke as a joke. There's some wicked people that have a lot of money. There's some wicked people that's broke as a joke. Your financial amount in your bank account does not equal your level of righteousness or how saved you are, right? Sometimes we fall into this trap of the prosperity teachers that try to tell us that, well, if you just have faith, God is going to give you money. Well, that's not how it works. If you have faith, God is going to bless you with whatever you need, right? It doesn't always say he's going to bless you with money, but sometimes it is money, because money is the tool in order to obtain physical things. See, back then everything was bartered with gold, silver, food, things that they would barter with, but it wasn't really concentrated on things like paper dollars, right? And so we've kind of moved away from the value of things being a direct exchange. And so we kind of have lost what am I trying to say? That we've kind of lost the connection to what money means. Money is just simply a tool or a medium of exchange that two parties are agreeing that its value, they're agreeing upon its value as a go-between for the exchange. That's all it is. It's not something to be worshiped. It's not something to get bent out of shape about. It's not something to brag about one way or the other. It's just a tool. Money is a tool, just like a hammer is a tool, just like a car is a tool. It's just a tool to get things accomplished. And so what you want to do is you want to use your tool wisely. You want to use your tool properly, and you want that tool to work for you, so that you're not trying to use a hammer to screw in a screw, for example. You want to use the right tool for the right job. So that is, I guess that's part of what's important, is that we don't get caught up on one thing or the other as far as money is concerned. That is just a tool. But what we don't want is for that tool to be a master over us, right? Because remember when I showed you the verse in Proverbs where it says that the servant is the the borrower is the servant to the lender. So we don't want it to have mastery over us or have rule over us, but we do want to understand that it is a tool that can help us to accomplish many, many things. Sorry, listen to me typing and getting crazy again here. So, all right. So I'm going to pull up a verse here, and this will probably actually be a good spot to stop, because I think it's a good balancing comment. Let me pull this up right here, and I'm going to pull it up on your screen for those that are watching on the live stream. So let me flip this over here. All right, so this is 1 Timothy 6 verse 8. All right, so I'm going to flip this over so you can see the Bible verse that I'm looking at right here. All right. 1 Timothy verse 8. And I'm going to actually back up to verse 6. Actually, I could probably read the whole chapter for the context, but that's okay. We're going to just start on 1 Timothy 6, starting with verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, which means clothing, and having food and clothing, let us therewith be content. But they that will be rich, in other words, you're constantly obsessed with becoming rich, but they that will be rich fall into a temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition, which means to be lost. Perdition means to be lost. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after that money, they have erred from the faith, and have pierced themselves through with many sorrows. But you, O man of God, flee these things and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold on eternal life, whereunto you are also called, and have professed a good profession before many witnesses. Now I'm gonna stop there and just kind of roll it back to the beginning. That godliness with contentment is great gain. You can be content with a little bit of money. You can be content if you have a lot of money. You can be content if you're middle class. You can be content if you broke as a joke. You can be content wherever you are in that whole economic stratosphere, if you will, because it's godliness with contentment that's great gain. How does a person obtain contentment? Well, you know that what you have, God has blessed you with. You're looking at the positive. You're looking at what you do have rather than what you don't have. And while you may be making goals and plans to improve your situation, you are content with what you have been blessed with, and you use that as the springboard, that attitude of gratitude. I'm sure you've heard that saying before, the attitude of gratitude. By having an attitude of gratitude, God can step in and bless and bring you whatever else that you will need at any given point in time. So once again, 1 Timothy 6:6, godliness with contentment is great gain, for we didn't bring anything into this world, and we're not going to carry anything out. But if you have food and clothes, be content with that. In other words, don't be obsessed with being too rich. Don't be worried about keeping up with the Joneses and having the latest fashion and having being able to brag about what you got that's better than what somebody else has. Be content that you have the basic things you need to live, because there's some people out there that don't even have that. There are some people that are still sleeping on dirt floors, that have no indoor plumbing, that literally have to get their water out of the river and walk back and forth to the river to go and get it. We are very blessed with a lot of abundance in this country. And if you've got food and you've got clothing, that's a good starting place to be content, because there may be many things that you want. And there may be many things that you don't have, and many things that you're trying to get. And they can be very important things, whether it's transportation, whether it's housing, whether it's education, whether it's a better job, a higher paying job, a different job, whatever it is that you're striving for. There's nothing the matter with striving for those things, but don't neglect or forget to be content and be grateful wherever you are, because God is with you, and he is the supplier of all of our needs. It's not your job that's supplying you with your needs. It's God that's supplying you with your needs. He just happens to be using that job to do it, but God is the one that's supplying those needs according to his riches and glory. He knows what we have need of. He takes care of the sparrows, and they don't do any kind of work whatsoever. They just fly around and sit up in the nest, and somehow every day they manage to get fed. They manage to eat. They manage to survive. It's because God feeds the sparrow. And if he can pay attention to the sparrow, most certainly